What's up, Headquarters Nation? I'm Tommy.
And I'm George.
And we'll be going over your fantasy football tips for dummies.
Tip number 1. Don't draft the QB first overall. Look, I know, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson almost scored 500 points each last year and the year before. But you have to look at your league. Most leagues are 1 QB leagues. So when you're looking at running backs who have 2, sometimes 3, or wide receivers, 2, sometimes 3, plus a flex, they end up getting more points over time.
Now that brings us into our point number 2. Know your league. Now, different leagues have different amount of position groups. So, there's 2 running backs in most leagues, 2 receivers in most leagues, and 1 quarterback in most leagues. But some like to mix it up and do 3 running backs or 2 quarterbacks. And there's a super flex position, which means your flex can be a quarterback, which means you have 2 quarterbacks. So that sort of goes into our last point, saying that since there's only 1 quarterback, you want to draft running back and receiver first instead of quarterback because you only have 1 quarterback. Well, you have to fill more running back and receiver slots. Additionally, there's PPR and standard leagues. Points per reception is PPR. And you want to check with your commissioner and see what kind of league you have because that really does change up your picks a little bit. Because in a PPR league, it's based on the amount of receptions you get. And some receivers get more yards but less receptions. And that's something you have to take into account there.
And that leads us into point number 3. Put as much effort into drafting your backups as you do into drafting your starters. Look, I know it may be rough going into rounds 10, 11, 12. You're stumbling across guys that you don't even know the names of. You need to stick to your research and draft the guys that you know can play. Your number 1 goal at all times should be to stay away from that auto pick button.
Now, that being said, you should also take a look into the bye weeks of your starters and backups because you don't want to have your starter and backup both having the same bye week because then neither of them can play. And then, for example, if your quarterback has a bye week, week 5, and your backup also has a week 5 bye week, then you don't have a quarterback for that week. So you got to make sure that you're looking into that. Additionally, quarterbacks and tight ends are more important than your running backs and receivers in terms of your backups bye week because you have 2 spots for running back, 2 spots for receiver. It's a lot easier to replace them. But when you have 1 quarterback, you got to have a backup that has a different bye week so they can get put in there when your starter's out.
On top of that, handcuffs. Look, it's football. It's going to happen. People are going to get injured. Especially your star running back that you drafted with the number 1 pick in your draft. What do you do now? Well, guess what? Lucky for you, you listened to this video and you listened to us, and you drafted their backup. That backup will now get 90 to 95% of the workload that starter originally got, and you will be set for the remainder of your season in your fantasy football league.
And that brings us to tip number 4, team bias. We all have our favorite teams. I'm a Lions fan, George is a Browns fan, but that doesn't mean I should automatically pick my favorite players from my favorite team. For example, Kerryon Johnson, he's my boy. But I can't pick him in the first, not even the second round. I'd look like an idiot. So you got to focus more on your research and what you've done into top players rather than what team they're on.
Speaking of research, that leads us into tip number 5, draft sheet rankings. You can't show up to your draft unprepared. You need to come ready with your research and your rankings, whether that be ESPN, Fantasy Pros, or the rankings that we provide you here on Sportsmania HQ.
Now on to tip number 6, and the most important tip of them all.
Most important by far.
Yeah, no question.
No question.
Have a fancy draft party. Bring the wings from B-Dubs, get some cheese curds. That's the best. Cheese curds are the best from B-Dubs.
By far. You have to get the caramel on the side with them too.
No, okay. You can't tell people that. That's our secret, man. You can't tell them that. No. If you ask the waiter, they know what they're talking about, all right? The caramel with the cheese curds is amazing. But no, in all seriousness, though, get a draft party with your boys. Get it all going. Have some fun, but don't forget your draft sheets either. Make sure you have your notes. Don't forget these tips, and you'll have a great season.
If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe.